Dice, yeah, ay, ay.
Meet Logan, the strong minded little elephant who learns that bravery isn't about being fearless, it's about believing in yourself even when you're scared. In this beautifully illustrated story, friends follow Logan through a colorful jungle as he learns to calm his worries, take deep breaths, and remind himself, I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. It's a story that helps kids, and maybe a few grown ups too, find courage, mindfulness, and strength in their hearts. Logan, the strong minded little elephant, by me, Oscar Luna. Available now at all major retailers and my publisher's bookstore, Milton and Hugo. Because it's up to every parent to show that their child deserves to know that strength starts from within. What happens when a single moment flips your entire life upside down? 10 years ago, while hiking tide pools with his kids, Matt Johnson slipped on a wet rock, landed on his head, and the impact damaged his optic nerve. An accident that would unravel everything he thought he knew about himself, his career, and his future. In this powerful conversation, Matt takes us back to the beginning, before the brain injury, before the darkness, when he was a tech worker grinding through brutal hours, missing his own life, and sprinting towards burnout without even knowing it. And then the fall came, and suddenly he was thrust into a world of migraines so intense they felt like electricity zapping through his brain. 2 years spent in a pitch black room lined with trash bags to block the light, and a spiritual isolation that felt like solitary confinement. But what makes Matt's story extraordinary isn't the suffering, it's the moment on day 2 of his darkest chapter when he decided he would not stop until he found a way out. From doctors who had no answers, to energy medicine that left him stunned, to discovering that PTSD, not just physical injury, was sabotaging his recovery. Matt rebuilt his life one tool, one belief, one breakthrough at a time. This episode is more than a story. It's a roadmap for anyone who feels trapped in their pain. If you ever wondered whether healing is possible after life knocks you flat, Matt's journey will change the way you see your own strength. Welcome to another episode of FYI I Am Damaged, where the healed, healing, and others share their wisdom.
So, Matt, can you take us back to the beginning? Who were you before the brain injury changed everything?
Oh, wow. I was on the wrong path. I was going down. I was in a tech job and, just working ungodly hours. I was trying to get a business going on the side and I was completely missing out on life. And the brain injury forced me to slow down and reevaluate. I had no choice. Keep working, the same. I kept showing up to the same job for, a couple of days there, try to, figure out a way that I could actually get work done, but it just didn't, it wasn't going to happen.
Okay. You described spending 2 years in a darkened room due to extreme light and sound sensitivity.
Yes.
What was that experience like physically, mentally, and spiritually?
Physically, if you've ever been zapped by electricity and felt that intense pins and needles type feeling, that's what was going on in my head. Severe migraine and all that. It was, absolutely brutal pain. I can't even put words to it. Mentally and spiritually, it was tough. My kids were still pretty small, and they understood that dad, was hurting and all that, but I could hear him playing outside, my room. I had a room that had black hefty bags taped up over the windows because I had just extreme light and sound sensitivity. But I basically wasn't a part of their life anymore, which was hard. That I wasn't the dad that I wanted to be, and that was really tough to deal with. Spiritually, being stuck in a dark room like that, in prison they call this solitary confinement. Definitely not an easy place to be in. It you know it, it was not a fun experience, but it turned me into who I am. I made a decision when I was in there on like day 2 that I was, gonna find my way out. I had no clue what that path was gonna look like, but I just knew I wasn't gonna stop. And, I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's what was going on at the time.
It's for the listeners because a lot of people get debilitated by certain things and they get put in that same situation and they have that, I'm the only one going through this. When for you're one of the examples, like this, you're another person going through it. And it's not something that gets splashed in on the news every day. People tend to think it's only happening to me. And to get your perspective of it, it can get them a little clear-minded about, hey, there might be a way out of this.
One thing I learned, I spent the first year and a half just going through every medical study there was, tried every harebrained treatment, from amino acids to hyperbaric oxygen, just trying to heal myself. I was looking for a miracle, basically. And I wound up giving a presentation to the San Diego Brain Injury Foundation. I have like a 3-page document on everything that I tried that actually helped. I give both of those out, for free, by the way. If anybody has a brain injury, hit me up. I can definitely help you. I got the chance through that to work with some of the people there, and I realized there's always someone who has it way worse than you. No matter what your issue is, there's plenty of people who will trade places with you. So it's just being grateful for what you have, and sometimes that's just the opportunity to get better. You know what I mean? Sitting there in the dark, basically flat on my back. I couldn't have my computer on or look at my phone for more than a few seconds in the very beginning. That was tough, but there are tons of people who would trade places with me. I realize that.
I totally agree with you. I suffer from Crohn's disease,
Oh,
and that's not easy. So
yeah,
you can,
yeah,
I remember seeing when I was researching about it, there was a young kid, looked normal. You lift up his shirt, you see tubes and all sorts of stuff. And, I looked at that. I'm like, I really hope I don't get to that point. I hope he's okay. But you're absolutely right. There's varying degrees on what someone is going through and what they, which side are they going to? Are they on the light side, going a little heavy side? I can totally, see eye to eye with you on that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, any kind of like health challenge or anything like that you're going through, the best advice I can give you is decide. The word decision comes from the Latin root de, which means from, and cadere, which means to cut. When you make a true decision, you cut off any other possibility. I did that on day 2, sitting in that dark room, and I had no clue what that journey was going to look like. I had 4 different neurologists. First one tells me there's nothing I can do for you and tries to book me for a follow-up. I'm like, why am I going to come back if there's nothing you could do for it? You know what I mean? I didn't say that out loud, but I didn't go back either. But the second one gave me a pill, maybe a little bit better. So hey, I can look at my computer for a little bit, so I can do my research and all that. I asked him though, do you have something that can help me sleep? Because I was going through this thing where the pain made it hard to sleep, which made the pain worse, and I was just going through these brutal downward cycles. And he told me, no, there's nothing I can do for you. So on to neuro number 3. And right away she says, yeah, let me give you amitriptyline, which worked. I could get, a nice 7 hours of sleep, which was heaven for me at the time. But, I'm beyond grateful to all my doctors and would not be where I am without them. The only reason I tell that story is how many people would have stopped with that first one. You know what I mean? It's, you got to take charge of that journey. And after I had gone through, all the whole thing with the medical studies and doing my presentation to the foundation, I came to the terrifying realization that medical science was not going to heal me. I realized that on the tiny topic of, how to heal a brain injury, I knew more than my neuros did, which was scary. And, there's way more neurology than that, which I know none of, but, I knew so much at that point just from doing my homework. So I started looking around for, all right, what else is out there? Lucky for me, I live in California, so I had a lot to choose from. started going into energy medicine and things like that. I was a total skeptic my entire life. I'm legit going through Groupon saying, all right, if it's a scam, at least I'm not out much money. One of the first things I tried was called Reiki. And I told you I had those pins and needles in my head. The best description I can give is she kind of made them fly in formation, if that makes sense. And I'm like, whoa, I have no clue what you're doing, but please don't stop. And so at the end of the session, I asked her, can you train me how to do this? And so I spent several days with her, learned Reiki. I got into pranic healing, Qigong, holistic faith healing, just everything I could find that helped. I tried to just dive in and master it. Made huge strides over the next couple of years. And, it didn't fix my, issue totally. I don't know if you want me to go into that story yet, but
Well,
it,
we're definitely gonna. I have a few, and if I miss, absolutely interject with it. I wanna, I want to get everything from this, and because I have a dear friend of mine who his wife is a Reiki master, and
nice.
she does it out here in New York, but she's based out of Massachusetts, Laura. And she does that. I went to one Reiki session, and it was very insightful about, for me, it was more of what she felt from me and what she saw, and translated that towards me. And, I felt a little calmer during the whole session with the hands and everything like that. And, it was very interesting. It was very interesting. She does that for a lot of people. She gets booked up a lot. It's an amazing experience. Every time my wife goes, she's like, she feels better, energized, and like how you said, like this, just something being redirected.
Right. Your body runs on electricity. When the electricity stops flowing through is when you take a dirt nap. And so that's my theory anyway. The energy medicine is just dealing with that, those electrical circuits. But
And you actually went into my next question about the four neurologists, and
okay.
I guess continuing going on to it, what surprised you most, because I think you were leading into it, that surprised you most about energy healing when you first tried it? You said things were pointing in the right direction. Like, can you expand on everything else that you felt with that?
Yeah, it was a complete shock to me because, like I said, I was a total skeptic, and I'm just, I'm looking for a miracle at this point. And so the fact that, this was probably a year and a half, 2 years into my recovery, and this was the first time that really that fire got put on my head. I mean, to feel relief after that long is something I can't even describe. But the fact that it worked was the biggest shock for me. I just wasn't a part of my belief system at the time, but it's just amazing. And I'm a big advocate of it now because I've seen, I've gotten into, the energy healing, a little bit of Chinese medicine, that kind of thing. Western medicine is the best, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor, but when you've got something acute, broken arm or, need open heart surgery or something like that, nothing can touch Western medicine. But when you're dealing with chronic type stuff, a lot of that has to do with those electrical circuits in the body, and you can get blockages and things like that. Trauma actually gets stored in the body. But when you have an imbalance or something like that, Eastern medicine, highly, highly recommend it.
Great. You eventually discovered PST was at the root of your chronic symptoms.
Yes.
What was it like learning that everything you've been trying physically wasn't addressing the real cause?
It hit me completely out of left field. I'd had it most of my life and didn't even realize until that day. My thought was that's something soldiers get. But, so many people, when I got into, my current line of work, soldiers have it, child abuse victims, domestic violence, natural disasters. Big new thing now is first responders and nurses. Just a lot of people. It's really. I'm not a doctor. I'm not diagnosing, but it's really when you have a response that's out of proportion to the stimulus, right? So, a smell, your subconscious can equate it to something that happened years ago, it trigger you, that kind of thing. In my case, I knew right away that the PTSD was, I got it by a brain scan, by the way. I'd been through, all the medical stuff and the energy healing. And, I'd made huge strides, but I still couldn't shake that light and sound sensitivity. And so I'm thinking at this point, do I have permanent damage? So I went and found special type of brain scan, maps the electrical activity in the brain. And, my brain wound up being okay, but areas that are supposed to be dark lit up like fireworks. That's how I got diagnosed. Fully out left field for me. But I'd known I had anxiety issues before that, but I never would have given myself that label. You know what I mean? And so right away, I knew what was going on. With a brain injury, the name of the game is bringing your brainwaves down, giving you a chance to rest and repair itself. My PTSD was keeping me in fight or flight and sabotaging the healing process. So I knew if I wanted to get out of that dark room that I had to, beat the PTSD first. So lucky for me, I was familiar with the incredible power of hypnosis. My dad quit smoking. He tried for 30 plus years, pills, patches, gums, you name it, failed every single time until he got hypnotized. After one session, he told me never even crack cigarettes again. And incredible stuff. But I was also familiar with neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, from a guy named Tony Robbins. Tony famously had.
I think you're hacking me because that's my next question.
Okay.
It's like, how did the hypnosis and the NLP reframe your recoveries? Just so I can ask the question. Yeah, I mean, please continue.
Yeah, great minds.
Tony Robbins?
I had, like I said, I'd known I had severe anxiety issues. I never would have given myself that label though, but I tried, 3 different talk therapists, and one of them kind of sort of helped me, but it was like a garden hose against the tide. You know what I mean? It's just, it wasn't gonna, do much. Another one just wanted to give me a pill for everything. The pills actually made me worse. And so beautiful tool for a lot of people, solves a lot, but it's not a one size fits all. In my experience, it didn't do a lot for me. So I knew I needed a different path. And so being familiar with, NLP and hypnosis, just to give you an idea, Tony famously had a woman that had 152 different personalities. He was actually able to integrate her right there on the spot in about 45 minutes in the middle of a seminar. That's the incredible power of this stuff. Yeah. Neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. But I knew that about, the two. So I went and I got quadruple certified in hypnotherapy and NLP coaching and all that. And I asked every instructor I had the exact same question: how do you heal PTSD? And they all tried to help me, but they didn't really have the answer. So I'm like, all right, I got to go back to the internet and find out who does. So 2.5 years later, I'm just binge watching, course after course, going through, the masters in both fields. Finally put together a protocol that I was actually able to heal myself. Long-winded answer, but
that was a very good one.
Yeah,
because people, this would be very interesting to people, because everyone looks for a magic bullet, which of course there isn't one. You have to integrate a lot of different things at a lot of different levels, and this would be very interesting. And who knows, it may work for some, it may work it may not work for others. It doesn't, like how you said, it doesn't or alluded to, it doesn't tell you like, hey, don't stop. Like, you shouldn't stop, and find what works for you regardless of how long it takes, because you shouldn't suffer in silence, or you shouldn't just live with whatever pain, like, oh, this is it, I'm done. No, it should never be that way. For listeners unfamiliar with these tools, how would you describe what hypnosis and NLP actually do for the subconscious mind?
Oh, good question. Hypnosis is where we kind of put your conscious mind aside. We get it to relax so we can go in and deal with those subconscious programs. Your subconscious controls everything in your body that you don't have to think about. Breathing, heartbeat, body temperature, how much insulin you create after a meal. Also that pit you get in your stomach when you're stressed. You know what I mean? It's all those bodily functions are controlled by it. It also controls up to 95% of all your day-to-day behaviors by your age 30. And so it's incredibly powerful. When we go in and rewrite those scripts, you make a small change down deep and the ripple effect on the surface is enormous. It's like my dad quitting smoking. It's one of the toughest addictions there is. And it got wiped out in an afternoon only because we were dealing with the programming, where it lived. You know what I mean? A lot of people have hangups about hypnosis. They see, stage hypnotists and things like that, think I'm going to make them cluck like a chicken or whatever. It's not like that. I can't make you do anything you would normally want. You never lose the ability to accept or reject any suggestion given. That ability is there with you no matter how deep you go. You always have your wits about you. You're always in control. NLP, it's very similar. It's kind of like having an operating manual for the brain. If someone, we talked about that pit in your stomach, if someone's, stressed out, then the first thing I'll have them do is tune into how do you do that. If you'd like to, we can run through it real quick. Take just a minute, but
Yeah, go ahead.
if you got stress or something like that, you can think about something that stresses you out a little bit, maybe, overdue bill or conversation you don't want to have. Tune into, where do you feel that in your body? Point to it if you can. And in your mind's eye, if that feeling had a color, what color would it be? First impression.
Say bills. Feel it in my stomach. Black.
Awesome. Is there more than one color?
No.
No. Okay, cool. So that black feeling, if it had a shape, what shape would it be? First gut reaction.
Triangle.
Cool. All right, that black triangle, if it were moving, if it were turning at all, what direction would it be turning in? If it's hard to tell, you can try turning it one way, then the other to see what feels natural.
I'm facing it, so it's going to how I'm seeing it clockwise. It moves, but slowly.
Okay. Does it change the feeling at all?
A little bit.
Okay, yeah, it can
An
be really
alleviation.
subtle. Yeah. Find the direction you like best, whatever feels best for you. And you can spin it up if you like, make that, new feeling stronger while you drain all that color out of it. Just make it totally transparent there.
Okay.
And then fill it back up with whatever color you like. Some people like gold or pink, green or blue. Whatever feels most peaceful for you. Just fill it back up.
Fill it up with white.
Okay, cool. Now that white triangle, still spinning it in your new favorite direction, try adding sparkle to it and watch it start to swirl throughout like a candy cane, one of those poles in front of a barber shop. Notice what that does to the feelings.
For me, it kind of smooths it out.
Yeah, yeah. All we've done is we've taken that subconscious program called stress and we gave it a visual component. What color is it? What shape? Which way is it turning? And then we turned the table on it so that we taught your subconscious, all right, let's do this with it now. And we got it to unwind.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I hope that helps the listeners. That's a common one that I do, but it's just tuning it. That's NLP. That's tuning into those processes, what you're going on. All right. How do you do that? All right. My stress is a black triangle. A lot of times, I have people deal with intrusive thoughts or, repetitive thinking, things like that. All right. How do you do that? Let's tune into that picture. Is it, where is it? To the right or to the left, above you, below you? How big is it? Color black and white, flat or 3D. You know what I mean? Once we tune into it, we can then play with it to make that, change that process or, make it go away. That's NLP.
And if people do this enough, they can actually do this for themselves at any given basis. That's the point, or you need, outside assistance.
Once you learn how to do it, it's like any skill. You can do it for yourself. So I teach people if they've got a long-standing habit, intrusive thoughts or whatnot. If you drill the process 7 times, that's usually enough to create a habit. So you'll remember to use it. That's the hard part, right? But once you learn how to do the process, it's easy. You can do it whenever. All you got to do is close your eyes and visualize.
I like that's a good thing for you. Close your eyes and visualize.
I've used that before.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. What are some of the biggest subconscious survival patterns that keep trauma survivors trapped even after therapy?
Yeah, the biggest one that keeps people trapped is that overactive fight or flight. What happens is, if you don't mind me geeking out on brain science for a second,
Go for it.
your brain is the most incredible computer ever invented. But when you look at it functionally, it's got three main layers. You've got your reptile brain, which understands fight or flight. Should I eat it, run from it, mate with it, whatnot? Its only job is to keep you alive for the next 2 seconds and to pass on your genes. That's all it really cares about. Above that, you have your mammal brain. And for this, think of your dog, right? Understands love, family, the pack, and all that. Whereas, some reptiles will eat their young, right? That's the difference between the two brain layers, right? Above that, you have your neocortex, which is all your higher order logical thinking. When you're stressed, especially the more extreme it is, your body will physically drain blood from your brain. So that neocortex that does your logical thinking gets drained. And guess who's in charge at that point? The reptile. And again, it only cares about keeping you alive for the next 2 seconds. I've dealt with a lot of people who've been in extreme stress situations. And something very common is they'll do something stupid or something that look back and say, what was I thinking? And I always tell them you weren't, your reptile was. It made a calculation. Yeah. It made a calculation on how to keep you alive for the next 2 seconds. And whatever that happened to be, that's what you did. Right. So if you want to do change work, the biggest thing is getting that fight or flight down, so, you can start to work on those other patterns. A lot of, I kind of badmouth, the drugs, the medications and everything. Those are absolutely necessary for some people. It's kind of like changing the gas in your tank. Your engine will run differently, but you haven't really dealt with, the issues in your engine yet. But that's the main one. Getting that fight or flight down. I have processes I use for dealing with like traumatic memories and things like that, and getting the nervous system to just chill out. And from there is where we do the rest of the change work.
Oh, great. You said traditional talk therapy and medication barely touched your anxiety and depression. What specifically made subconscious work succeed where those methods didn't? And what was a pivotal moment when it helped you finally release something you didn't know you were holding?
Ooh, talk therapy is a wonderful tool for a lot of people. I don't want to badmouth it here. In my case, my trauma was subconscious. And I find that for a lot of my clients. My advice, I'm not a doctor. Please do what your doctor says. But if it's not working for you, you need to find something that does. That goes back to that decision. All right, you don't have what I need. Does, you know what I mean? And if you're doing the work and all that, and you're still not seeing the results, there's a good chance you've got some subconscious stuff going on. For me, the biggest release for me, that's going back a ways. Mine happened over the course of like 2.5 years. And I learned how to deal with the fight or flight fairly soon. It was dealing with the traumatic memories and all that. Once I let go of those, that I got that to relax. The biggest thing for me was I got mine as a little guy. If you face that big, event, if you're a soldier on a battlefield or something like that, you're pretty much an adult already, right? Your personality is formed for the most part. So once you deal with that event and, there's ancillary stuff that goes on, hypervigilance, flashbacks, things like that, deal with that. And, your job is pretty much done. If it happens when you're a little kid, it's really impactful on your personality, like your self-concept, if that makes sense, your identity.
Now, when you say little kid, what age ranges, when you describe these things, what age ranges are you talking about?
The biggest ones would be 0 to 7. That's what's called the imprinting phase. And what happens is you're taking in huge amounts of data, but you haven't developed what's called your critical faculty, which means you haven't developed the ability to judge anything that's coming in. So what's going on here? Is this my fault? Very common when kids will blame themselves. Mom and dad are fighting. I must have done something wrong, things like that. But those types of things really impact your types of self-worth. You make conclusions about yourself that just aren't true. And they're in my case, I shut myself down a lot. And that's another really common one. But if you've got severe self-worth issues, things like that, that's a good clue that something happened to you during those years. You hadn't developed the ability to judge, all right, is this a one-off thing, or is this just how life is? Who are the people who are programming me? Are they happy? Are they good role models for me? You know what I mean? Very few people make that distinction at that age.
A lot of men have that story of that I am not enough.
Yeah.
And
Very common.
Was like, yeah, yes, you are. And breaking that pattern, yes, for me, I believe it is a pattern because you're coming from another man who thinks they're not enough, and so on and so forth, and you're repeating that. And it's great that now we're identifying those patterns to say, hey, you know what, that's not a true story that we're telling ourselves, and we are enough, and we could actually be more. Then please continue.
Well, yeah, you look at the potential of any human being, it is enormous. And if you don't believe that, look at somebody like Stephen Hawking, right? He couldn't even speak. And look what he did. I mean, it changed our understanding of the universe. You know what I mean? We all have incredible potential, but it's just, the trauma that happens to us and the cultural conditioning, things like that, really, tamp us down. I have not read the book yet. I saw a study it's called Beyond Breakthrough, something like that. But NASA developed a test. They were looking for their most innovative engineers. And so they developed a test that measured creative genius. They took that same test and gave it to 1,600 kindergartners. 98% of them scored as creative geniuses. By age 10, they tested the exact same kids, throughout their school years. By age 10, it was down to like 30%. By 18, it was down to 2%. So we went from 98% creative geniuses down to 2. That shows you, tamping people down. You know what I mean? It's when you change that self-concept, that's when you can break those shackles, basically.
Imagine back then those stories of what they've gone through, and that is insane. That is insane. From, we said 98 to 2%.
Yeah, absolutely. If you think about our school system, and it's going to sound like I'm bad mouthing, I'm not. That's
oh no, that's I'm in New York, and they weren't lying even back in the 50s or the 60s that it's a segregated system. It's a segregated system still to this day.
It's designed to get you to conform. Round peg in a square hole. You know what I mean? If you don't fit in that mold, then there's something wrong with you, is the attitude a lot of times. You know what I mean?
And that's where you want to feel like, okay, like I actually want to fall through the cracks, because falling through the cracks means, okay, I get away from where I am and I can do something better. Like I'm a product of that, because in the South Bronx, very bad neighborhood, back in like the 80s, 90s, if I would have gone to what we call, I don't know what you guys have in California, but we call it zone schools. So if you live in a zone and that school is there, you go there.
Yeah.
So at that time, going to high school, if I would have went to my zone school, I shit you not, I would have got eaten alive.
Oh yeah.
But luckily, I was able to get into a school that was in downtown Manhattan called the Murray Bertram, and changed my life. Changed my life. At that time, it was a great school. I don't know how it is now. Pardon me. And I know that was very beneficial to my life to be there rather than where I'm from, because it gave me more opportunities. So I can clearly speak on that because it does make a change. And seeing the kids that I've grew up with in the neighborhood go to their zone schools, completely different, completely different. Some of them are like animals. Some of them are just like, just you see the shell forming. You
Yeah,
see them just that protective, like you look at them, you're like, you're not the same. It's a wild thing to
it
to
is.
witness
It
and
is.
to survive from.
If you look at statistics of people who are dyslexic, not good outcomes in life in general. But if
You're
you
calling it out. I'm
are okay,
dyslexic.
seriously,
Yeah,
I actually do
I'm
work on
telling you,
that. That
you're
was
reading my, you're
okay. All
reading my
right.
life.
That was my first client. I went through NLP school. I had no intention of, working with anybody. It just hadn't even crossed my mind. I was just trying to fix my own crap. And about a week or two after, a friend of mine posted on Facebook. She's like, "Hey, my little girl is dyslexic." And I remembered like this 10-second blurb on, how to correct it. I'm like, I think I can help her. And so, I'm sweating bullets on the way up there. But I worked with her for like 20 minutes, and she went from struggling with 3 and 4 letter words to being able to do 11, 12, 13 letter words, 3 syllables, forwards and backwards within like 20
Wow.
minutes. It is incredible.
So
But
she was heavy with that. Wow.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, she went on to win all kinds of reading awards and stuff like that. But dyslexics, like, not good outcomes in life in general, right? If you test as that, you probably go to special classes or a special school. Some of the most famous dyslexics in life: Walt Disney, Einstein, Leonardo da Vinci. You know what I mean? Geniuses that their brain, they didn't fit in that round hole. You know what I mean? But
I can attest to that. The way everybody, not everybody, well, the people I know and that I'm able to open up to that degree with, and I show them like how I see things or that, or even like the jokes I make, and they're like what, like how the hell does your brain work? I'm like, it works the way it works, and
yeah,
and it's I kind of grew into it. I liked it. It wasn't debilitating for me. It was hard for learning in a structured environment. Um, but I like what it did for my, I like what it did for my personality.
yeah,
And when I meet that type of person who was probably doesn't even know they're either dyslexic or I just vibe with them and it's just I have an amazing time. I
yeah,
have an amazing time,
yeah,
crack the most messed up jokes, and we just
yeah,
have an awesome time. And it's just, I like the way it makes me think. And
yeah.
because to me, it's out of the box.
Absolutely, and that's my point exactly. Is there is a superpower associated with that? You know what I mean? It's just a matter of finding it. But you have talents that the rest of us don't have. There's, they're coming around now, but schools in general do not even look for those talents. They just try to make you, all right, we got to get you reading at a certain level. Let's beat you over the head until you can do it.
Yeah. Hit
But
the numbers. Yeah.
yeah, there's, how many Da Vinci's or Einsteins have we quashed before they even got started just with that approach? You know what I mean? I've seen things, autistic people can do some incredible stuff. There was one guy, he took a 20-minute helicopter ride around New York City and could draw the skyline perfectly from memory.
I saw that one. Yeah.
Yeah, there are others who, they can read like computer logs for cybersecurity way better than the rest of us can. They're just, they can sit there and watch that stuff and okay, there's a hacker. They spot things the rest of us don't. There's, I'm not a believer in disability. You know what I mean? I think you're just, if Shaquille O'Neal tried to be a horse jockey, yeah, he would, he would
Feel
fail
sorry for the
miserably.
horse.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But thank God he played basketball. You know what I mean? It's something he could dominate. It's just finding that right thing for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Now, of course, like how you stated before, you touched on it that there's a misconception with the hypnosis, and it means losing control or being manipulated. How do you address that myth with skeptical clients when they're really stuck in
Yeah,
that,
I
like, oh
get
my
that a lot.
God, yeah, I'm gonna see myself on TikTok clucking like a chicken.
Most people get introduced to it through stage hypnosis. They'll see the guy at the fair making people do crazy stuff. If you watch those guys, they bring them up and they'll put them under. They're looking for, suggestibility, depth of trance, like any hypnotist would, but they're also being very playful with them, and they're seeing who plays back. They're seeing who wants to entertain the audience. Those are the ones they keep, right? Those people are fully in control of what they're doing. But if you've ever watched a movie and had it stir your emotions, maybe even cry at a movie, right? You've been hypnotized. You had absorption in the experience and a continually narrowing focus, and what's called an alpha brainwave state. They sync your Hollywood is really good at this with the music and all that. They sync your brain waves right where they want them. But that is the definition of a hypnotic trance. What I do is the exact same mechanism. You also get it with road hypnosis. If you ever taken a long distance trip and you just zone out on the road, that's a hypnotic trance. Exact same mechanism. So you're actually going in and out of them all the time. They're just very light. Hypnosis is just, there's not a day that goes by that you don't go in and out of hypnotic trance at some point.
And have you had a client that would just, what would they do if they feel like, or they convince themselves that they were losing, convince themselves that they were losing control?
I had one who was freaked out about hypnosis. This was like early when I first started working with people, and she was just freaked out about the whole process. When you can't relax, then you lose the effect. I always tell people, it's if you think back to your favorite game of pretend as a kid, yeah, at some point, me and my buddy would, go out and play GI Joe, hunt each other's with, sticks for guns, right? At some point, that gun became real in our minds, right? If there was part of us hanging back saying, "No, it's just a stick," you lost some of that impact, right? It's that ability to dive in and be a kid again. That's when you get the result. Exact same mechanism in your brain. So, um, with that particular lady, I refunded her money. It's like, yeah, no problem. Come back to me if you want to try again. But but beyond that, uh, there's almost nobody can be hypnotized unless you got to I'm brain damaged and I can do it all day long. So just about anybody can.
Now, for someone who feels, I guess I'm more of a heavier sense, broken, numb, or disconnected from themselves, what does reprogramming actually look like?
Okay. First of all, it's dealing with that fight or flight, like we talked about, just getting your nervous system chill out. And after that, it's just a matter of identifying what's going on. Like when I work with somebody, or the first session is just tell me what's going on, what's going on in your life, things like that. We go back over events, things that happened to you, things like that. What conclusions did you draw from it? And, you know, everybody's different. It's like a fingerprint. And it's just a matter of getting to the bottom of, what programs are you playing in your mind? Feeling that disconnection. I have that too. It's basically numbing out. It's kind of the same way somebody would get addicted to alcohol or something like that, just to numb that pain. You know what I mean? An extreme case would be dissociation. It's it's it, basically you solve that trauma first. The events and all that, and just work on the symptoms. A lot of times when you've dealt with what's happened, the memories and all that, a lot of stuff goes away on its own. I've had people who, they when you're stressed out, your body craves junk food. You know what I mean? I have a lot of people who tell me, "Oh, I quit eating junk food. Didn't even try."
Go for that Snickers bar, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, again, it's very individual. It's like a fingerprint, but there's formulas for dealing with.
So a person in your position would have to be fluid to whatever the person is coming to you with. Does I do you find it difficult? But I know you're learning from experience, so I'm sure you've gotten very easier at it, and dealing with those heavier cases must be really, how does it take a toll on you?
It used to. I've learned to kind of distance myself from it. I still care, but I don't get emotionally, wrapped up in it like I used to. But yeah, it got to me because, I care about people. So I really care about it and getting the results. As far as it being tough, I guess I've been doing it long enough. There's not a lot that, I haven't really seen or have a tool that would work for. You know what I mean? It's just I've gotten my toolkit to the point where there's not a lot I can't deal with, to be honest. Sounds egotistical, but it's just product
No,
experience.
to me that sounds like confidence, and for going to you for what you practice, if I go to you, I want you to be confident. I want you to be to the point of like borderline ego. Would you go to a doctor that says like, well, maybe I got a 50-50 chance of healing you? It's like, no, I want the guy who's going to be like riding in on a white horse or like, I got you. We're going to knock you out. We're going to sip and you're good.
I am
You
the
know?
only therapist I know that gives a money back guarantee. If you're not happy, I don't want your money. And I've given that in 7 years. I've given that back all 2 times. One was with the lady who was freaked out about hypnosis. Another who I didn't even hypnotize her. We did some NLP work, but she my personal opinion, I'll probably never know, but there's a thing called secondary gain, where if I take away your problem, then you're getting some other type of benefit from having it. And my suspicion was it was that, but you know, literally everyone else that I've dealt with has had rave reviews. And so, yeah, I stand behind my work. So I guess that would be, the confidence slash arrogance.
That's perfect. You've talked about your tool bag
Mhm.
and your what you use and everything. And so after all the stuff that you've done, after all your own personal healing, after healing all those others, what are and of course without giving out the secret sauce, what would you like to touch on that is usually your go-to for healing?
I have a few of them. I have processes that I use for traumatic memories. It's called the NLP movie theater exercise. I do another process called timeline therapy. Your timeline is just how your subconscious organizes time. There was a time before you knew what anger was, or sadness. We can go back before you knew what those emotions were, and wipe them out of your nervous system. I love doing that with people. I have hypnosis processes that I do that can take you back before you picked up any of your crap and help you clear it. Now, people are on natural highs for, a week after that, things like that. But, again, it just depends. I've got ones that, wipe the stress out of your body, delete, negative programming, beliefs and, things like that. Those conclusions we talked about yourself, even if you're not aware of them. It's just, again, it's like a fingerprint. It's just, matching the right tools to the person.
Right. Great. How can listeners begin identifying their own subconscious patterns that may be running the show without their awareness?
Good question. Look at the results in your life. If you are, self-sabotaging or something like that, you want to look at your behavior. All right, do I have approach avoidance? Do I get that feeling? You know what I mean? If you want some result in your life and you just can't get yourself to achieve it, look at your buts and your ifs. I could do this, but I could have this if, things like that. But it's just if your life isn't what you want it to be, if your behavior is not what you want it to be, or your emotions, whatnot, that's where to start.
Well, that's great. And a lot of people need to look at the actions between the words, and also the words themselves between what they're trying to get across. And that's a good point. Everyone does that. And when they do it, but this, but that, and it's like, okay, you just kind of wiped away everything, behind what you just said, and you're doing yourself a disservice. I always try to catch myself and not say the but or whatever, be like, however, or just train myself to do that. Cause when somebody says like, you saying but just negates everything you just said.
Mhm. Yeah.
And the person said because of, regardless, it's one of those, it's the but always using if, and you're right, and you catch those, and it makes a world of difference on how you speak to yourself, for yourself, and to others.
Yeah. Yeah. You have a reputation with yourself. If you follow through on what you say you're going to do, you build up that evidence in your own mind. If you are someone who constantly says one thing and then you don't follow through, you build up that reputation too. And you'll say, I'm just a procrastinator. You just assigned yourself an identity and you will never outperform that identity. So you got to be really careful what you say to yourself. Someone very important is listening.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm trying to instill in my kids young, and it's very hard to be like, trust me, it's very hard to build and very easy to destroy.
Yes. Yep.
How do you help your clients see their pain as a teacher rather than a life sentence? And you may have touched on that already, but if there's any more insight you can give, then that'd be great.
Seeing your pain, it's when we get to the bottom of the patterns that you're running. And this one superpower I have, I think I mentioned I have an IT background, so I'm very good at troubleshooting. That is what's making me
Same here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm in IT too.
Oh, nice. But it makes me really good at spotting those patterns. You know what I mean? And when we can make the unconscious conscious, that's when we figure out how to deal with it. You know what I mean? That's the secret.
What advice would you give someone listening right now who feels hopeless or stuck in their trauma recovery?
You are not stuck. You just haven't found the right tools yet. And, that may be stuff like I do. That can be EMDR, shrooms. I don't care what it is as long as it works for you. You know what I mean? If what you're trying hasn't worked, then the question is, all right, you don't have my answer. Who does? You know what I mean? And it's just, you got to develop what I call your PhD, big headed determination. I'm going to beat this shit no matter what. You know what I mean? And
I know a few people who need that. Yeah.
yeah. But, one of the big reasons I do these podcasts is, we have this cultural thing that, all right, you have trauma, you go to a therapist, maybe they prescribe you some pills, things like that. That's a wonderful tool for, probably most people out there. But when that doesn't work, there are other things out there. And so it's just, please do what your therapist tells you and all that. But, have the courage to try and just the openness to, all right, your therapist has a certain set of tools. They learned a certain set of things in school and all that. That doesn't mean they know everything. And so, again, it's you just got to take charge of that journey and just, all right, this guy, helping, not helping, whatever. If I need more help, it's up to me to go find it.
That's great. That's great. Almost done here. What does rewiring and rising, the name of your YouTube channel, mean to you personally?
Neurons that fire together, wire together. And so when you have a long-standing habit, the reason it's so hard to break is those neurons are physically wired in your brain. It's actually one of my favorite parts of working with people. I'll exaggerate it here, but you can actually see the neurons physically rewiring their brain. Their heads are just kind of shake, but it's when you deal with the tool set that I have, you can rewire them the way you want. And so, figure out, what kind of person do I want to be? What do I want to, get rid of? What do I want to, start, or program into myself or whatnot? That's what rewire and rise is. It's, reprogramming with a purpose.
Oh, that's great. That's good. I like that. And finally, where can people learn more about your work or begin exploring hypnosis NLP as tools for transformation?
Yeah, you can go to my website. It's Matt Johnson NLP. That's MattJohnson, and then NLP for neuro-linguistic programming.com. I have a free NLP course on there. It's called NLP Mind Magic. We do the unspinning thing. We do the intrusive thoughts exercise. There's 12 NLP exercises up there. We do, procrastination, imposter syndrome, all kinds of cool stuff. But it's my most requested exercises, but it'll give you a good intro to how NLP works and how to rewire your mind. You know, I've got links to everything else that I do up there too.
Oh, and that's awesome. I'll make sure to include that in the episode to make sure that it's easier for everyone to get to it. And Matt, thank you very much for your time, for all the insight, and it was great having you.
Thanks for having me. It was my pleasure to be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
If Matt's story touched you, take a moment and just breathe, because what you heard today wasn't just a journey through pain, it was a blueprint for rising. 10 years ago, Matt slipped on a tide pool rock and woke up in a painful life he didn't recognize. He spent 2 years in darkness, battling migraines that felt like electricity firing through his skull, listening to his kids laugh outside a room he couldn't leave. But even then, on day 2, he made a decision. He would find a way out, and he never stopped searching. What you heard today proves one simple truth. Healing doesn't come from waiting, it comes from trying. From refusing to settle for the first no a doctor gives you, from exploring the unfamiliar, energy work, brainwave maps, hypnosis, NLP, until something finally cracks open and light gets in. And if you're listening right now feeling stuck, overwhelmed, or convinced your pain is a life sentence, let today remind you it's not. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're not alone. You're simply in the part of your story where the tools you need haven't found you yet. Carry this with you. You're allowed to heal. You're allowed to rise. And just like Matt, you are capable of becoming someone you didn't even recognize in the best way. This is FYI, I am damaged. Meet Logan, the strong-minded little elephant who learns that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about believing in yourself even when you're scared. In this beautifully illustrated story, friends follow Logan through a colorful jungle as he learns to calm his worries, take deep breaths, and remind himself, I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. It's a story that helps kids, and maybe a few grown-ups too, find courage, mindfulness, and strengthen their hearts. Logan, the strong-minded little elephant, by me, Oscar Luna. Available now at all major retailers and my publisher's bookstore, Milton and Hugo. Because it's up to every parent to show that their child deserves to know that strength starts from within.